Fatal Lie. I don't have a copy of the book yet, so I can't hold it up. But you can find it anywhere at your favorite bookstore or on Amazon. When we started Rutledge, one of the things that we want to do is decide on the undercurrent, the basic theme. In one of the books, we had looked at the fact that Rutledge always takes several days to get to the scene of the crime. What would happen if Rutledge was right there, almost on the heels of the crime being committed? And that turned out very well. What's the title of it? I always have to, because so many books I have to stop and think. In Cornwall, they happened upon a little note in the bottom of the brochure about a house we were visiting, a beautiful house, all just elegant. And this little footnote gave us some information about one of the elements of the house. We read this and we thought, we could turn that upside down and see how that went the other way around. So with A Fatal Lie, what we wanted to do was consider what would happen if Rutledge went to start an inquiry about a simple murder. What would happen if he started to investigate it, and all of a sudden, with no preparation, no expectation of anything more than just finishing it in 2 or 3 days, he found himself with an exploding case, with one that was going to take him through Shropshire, Cheshire, and Northern Wales. It hinged on the problem that we have with so many suspects in a murder inquiry. A lot of them lie. They have good reason to lie. They are either suspects or they're hiding something that they don't want people to know. And Rutledge has to figure out what he's hearing and how this applies to the case he's working with. Well, in this one, everybody is lying. And it's up to Rutledge to find out which lie out of all those he's told is the fatal lie. Which one is the lie that started the chain of murders? And this is going to take him quite a bit of time. One of the interesting things for us writing this story was that we had explored all of this area. We had been to the quarry. We had taken the narrowboat across the aqueduct. We had done all of these things. And so we had personal experience with what Rutledge was going to see and what he was going to feel, how he was going to address the mystery. I think one of the best things about going to England, about actually walking the ground, is that you learn so much more about the lives of the people you're going to be writing about. And that for us is always both pleasure and research. At this point, I think we've seen quite a bit of England, and we've learned quite a bit of the English, but Rutledge is happy and, no, not happy, but he's well and going forward in A Fatal Lie. One of the things that you really think about as you are writing is what makes characters. How do you take a character? You've given a person a name, you've decided who she is or who he is, but how do you give him the secrets that he or she is trying to keep from the police? And this is always an interesting situation for us, because quite often the characters tell us themselves what secrets they're keeping and why they're keeping it. And all we have to do as writers is thread all this together. We don't outline, so we don't know ahead of time what somebody is going to say. We don't know ahead of time what this character will give to the book, or what this character will have to give Rutledge a clue, something that he can work with to go forward. We just have to sit there and listen to them. And this is very interesting, because the more they talk to you, the more you feel that you have understood them, the more you can see how the plot is shifting because of something they have mentioned, or something they have felt, or something they have tried to conceal. And a lot of people say, how do you listen to the characters? They're all in your head. But yes, they're in our heads, but we can see them, we can hear them, we can feel them, and we know what they look like, we know how they sound, and we know what they're afraid of. And this adds to the plot in ways that if you, or in our case at least, if you sit down and plot it all out ahead of time, you're so in. We like to let it flow and see what happens. The amazing thing so far is that we've gotten to the end of every book we've written and found an answer. But there may be one day when we come along and the book won't tell us what's going on. We'll have to figure it out ourselves. So that's one of the backgrounds of writing. A lot of people ask us, how do you write together? How do two people create this single world that you find in the book? And it's through being in the same place, reading the same materials, researching the same questions, sharing all of this. So that what I know, Charles knows. What Charles knows, I know. So we both have about 4,000 or 5,000 books that we have collected over the years. We don't have enough bookcases for them, but that's a problem that I think everybody has. But because we share everything, we can hear and feel and think with the characters. We argue sometimes over what's being said, whether we think this character should go in this direction or that direction. But the easy way to deal with all of this is to play it out, see what happens. Is it a false trail, or is it something that we hadn't expected and wanted to put into the book to completely change what Rutledge is seeing, completely change what he is feeling? I think it took us almost a year and a half to learn to write together. Collaborating is not the easiest thing in the world to do. And you have to trust the other person. You have to feel that the other person is on the same wavelength. Fortunately, both Charles and I were history buffs. Both of us love movies. Both of us had a feeling for the Great War and for England. And one of the things we wanted to do with the Great War was bring it back to the consciousness of people who had read about it in high school or college, but never thought of it as a pertinent thing in our day and age. But it is. What happened in the Treaty of Versailles at the end of the war shaped the 20th century, and it's still shaping how we see the world today. For example, the Treaty of Versailles tried to, or Wilson at the Treaty of Versailles tried to start the idea of a League of Nations, which the U.S. signed on to. And out of World War II came the United Nations, which was a remnant of what Wilson was trying to put across. Africa has changed, the Middle East has changed, the Orient has changed, Russia changed during World War I. So it's something that speaks to our time. And the people in this early part of the 20th century still have something to say to us. I mean, we're going through a pandemic now, and they went through it almost a little over 100 years ago. We didn't learn much from what they experienced. And I think this is why people say that history will repeat itself if you don't hear what it has to say. So those are all the things that go into writing any book. I think the most important thing in A Fatal Lie, as far as Rutledge goes, is that he's always been a good listener, but he has to talk to people and figure out whether what they're saying is a lead or not. And this is something that in many ways challenges him as a person as well as a policeman. Now, there's an inn, a pub in the book. I have been there. I have walked all through it. I've seen the pictures on the wall. I know the people, or at least knew the people who owned it at the time, and I think they've sold it now. But it was a place that I felt very comfortable in. Charles has seen the pictures. He knew the people we were involved with, and he could pick up on that just as easily as I could pick up on something that he had discovered. Action scenes are something that we enjoy writing. Somebody asked me once if Charles wrote all the battle scenes. Well, he doesn't. When you've read as much about World War I and handled as many weapons and other paraphernalia as I have, you get pretty good at writing battle scenes on your own. But we share that too. I think that there was something about the main theme as we got into A Fatal Lie that really, we felt really personally. As you read, you'll begin to understand what that is. But there's a character in that story who is a catalyst in many ways, but only by being off screen. And this is a very interesting thing to work with. So it'll be very interesting to see how you and other readers will feel about this particular character. I know she or he touched us. I won't say which. It's amazing how real your characters are in the books. I dream about them. I don't know if Charles does. I never really thought to ask him. But I dream about them. I think about them in odd places. I think about them in a doctor's office or driving in a car or just mopping the kitchen floor. All of a sudden, something will pop into your head and you're saying to yourself, oh, that explains her. Or, oh, that's what Rutledge finds in the ashes of the fire. So it's a weird business writing, but it's a very rewarding one. It's one that obviously we enjoy, or we wouldn't be so many books into it, both with Bess and with Rutledge. But I think also it's rewarding in its own way, because we have created a world, and as Peter James said, we set in motion chaos, and then we bring it to a conclusion. But we've learned, talking to many policemen, that there's not always a happy ending. It isn't like fictional mysteries where you can decide how many people live happily ever after. In real life, murder has a ripple effect, and it changes the lives of many people for many years afterward. So you have to go into this realizing that what you're doing when you're killing off a character or putting another character in danger, you have to realize that if these were real people, how this is going to affect them. So I've sort of wandered around the subjects. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Does anybody have a question?
The first question that came in is from Joyce, who says, you have a strong female character in Bess, and you have a strong male character in Ian. Do you and Charles each take the lead on one of those characters?
Actually, no, because you have to stop and think. Charles had a mother, a sister, grandparents, aunts, cousins. He knows something about, and has been married, so he knows something about women. I've had the male equivalent, father and cousins and all. So if you're a good writer, I think you are able to understand not just what you yourself have experienced, but what, for example, your mother went through when she had a miscarriage, or your great aunt went through when she had breast cancer in 1923 and survived until the 60s. These are things that you experience with your relatives and with your friends. So as far as we're concerned, I know Beth as well as Charles does. Charles knows Ian as well as I do, or vice versa, as you can imagine. It isn't hard. We've had strong women in many of the books. And I think Charles, having had a strong mother and a strong sister, probably understands it very well from a male point of view.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Christy wonders, will there ever be a case or maybe a personal issue that takes Rutledge out of the UK?
Well, this is a problem. Years ago, I was watching the Rumble series, and Rumble went to Africa. It was not as successful a story and plot line as those with all the people he knew who lived in Whitechapel and all the other lower class neighborhoods in London. He knew those people well. But when he was in West Africa, he was in a different culture. We've taken the book out of England in some ways. One of them, we found something. I actually saw something when I was in Madeira that I hadn't known about. And when I got home and showed Charles the pictures and all the different things I had learned about the island, we could see that this was something that had to stop and then return to England for Rutledge to deal with. The same was true with the book that starts during the heavy fog in just above Nice. We actually experienced a heavy fog and had to drive down from the mountains on crooked roads all the way back to Nice. And I can tell you from that experience, as harrowing as it was, we knew exactly how the characters would feel when they had to negotiate those hairpin turns and couldn't see where the drop was. So we've also had characters who have lived elsewhere. For example, Melinda, whose childhood was spent in India, who's traveled the world. So in that way, we bring in other places to Rutledge. But so far, he hasn't been invited to New York or Paris to do anything. We'll see. It might happen. You never know.
Okay, well, we have two people Laurel and Margaret, who are wondering, will he ever experience some joy in his life or have some positive relationships?
That's a good question. Ian came out of a hospital and returned to the yard in June of 1919. He was aware of the fact that if he didn't return to the yard, Hamish would win, that he would eventually go mad. And he looked at the yard as a way of keeping his sanity. If you've read A Test of Wills, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's only, let's see, in this book, I have to stop and remember, the book we're writing now, it's in late spring of 1921. It hasn't been that long a time, and there's always Kate. Kate, I think, is going to appear in the book in 1922, more than she does in this particular book. But Rutledge will have to tell me, and Charles, how he feels. I mean, I've said this before, a mother can invite a lovely person to make a wonderful daughter-in-law for dinner. And the daughter, potential daughter-in-law, and your son don't click at all. And he goes out and finds somebody else, and you have to decide whether you like her or not. I've heard so many mothers tell me tales about it. And it's true with somebody like Ian. He has to decide. I know Meredith's planning was important in her life early on. And the poet, O.A. Manning, was very important. He's got other women in the book. But I think Kate has some potential. I'd invite her to dinner anytime.
Okay, thank you. Pat asks whether your books are popular in England.
Yes, they're popular in England. They're also popular in Germany. We try to be very objective about that war. And so we tell the truth as it was, but we never really made the Germans out as the propaganda of the time had treated them. And so the books sell very well there. Both in Japan, we have quite a few friends in Canada, New Zealand, Australia. It's amazing how people respond to both Bess and Rutledge. I don't know why. I mean, we wrote the character, we created him, and yet there's no way we can tell you why people are so drawn to him. I think that's Rutledge. That's not us.
Well, that leads into David's question, which is whether you have a favorite Rutledge book.
Oh, well, let me see. It's impossible really to judge because there's so many characters in so many of the books. A Divided Loyalty, we met some very interesting people that we really liked. And The Cold Treachery, Maggie is one of my favorite characters. What a question. It stays with you for a long time, or stayed with me at least, for a long time after that final scene with her. So it's hard to. My editor says, and I'll give you her answer, that each book she thinks is her favorite. So that's a good sign. As long as your editor feels that way, all is well.
That's a good answer. Just so you know, there's a lot of chatter. People like Kate very much.
Oh,
they're on Team Kate.
I really like to hear that. This is why I really miss coming and talking in person at the library or a bookstore or wherever, because you get the temperature of the room, so to speak, as you're talking about characters. And so that's very nice to hear. I'll tell Rutledge about that.
Did you and Charles start out by writing together in person, or have you always been separated geographically? And how has your style of communication developed over the years?
When we first started, Charles was in North Carolina, I think, and I was here. We talked about the possibility of writing together on a plane coming home from a convention. And then when this was after he and I had already discussed doing it, and we talked about some of the ramifications of what would happen. But other than that, we do confer when we're at conventions or on a plane. But most of the work is done at a distance. We've gotten accustomed to that. We feel freer to argue with each other, maybe. Most important thing, I think, is that when we're in the same room together, we talk about all sorts of things and don't get much done with the book. So I think we'll stick with long distance for quite a while. We use computer, we use instant message, we use emails, talk on the telephone a lot. And it's a good thing they don't charge per minute anymore. But this is how we work it out. We send things back and forth to give us time to look at something and discuss it and decide whether this is the direction the other person likes. It works very well. It really has been the best way. We just stumbled over it. We didn't do this on purpose.
Several people are asking what you're currently reading. Who are your favorite authors? Do you like to read mysteries? Were you inspired by any particular authors?
Let's see. Except for research and history books and my favorite authors, I always read mysteries. And I like Louise Penny, Crombie, Ian Rankin, trying to think, Lee Child, all sorts of people. Nelson DeMille has been one of my favorite writers because he has gone back into another war and talked about it. And I found that very interesting, his style to ours. I think right now I'm not reading because we've got these deadlines coming in. But I have a couple of books set aside. One is by the author of Crimson Lake. She's an Australian, very different style of history. And I like that very much. There are all sorts of other books I have. I have a bin here. I have a Lee Child. I have Ian Rankin's later. They're all on the bedside table. The cats knock them off regularly. So when there's one list, it becomes another list. Then I pick them up and stack them back again. To read. I've always loved mysteries. Charles and I grew up with parents who read to us. My father introduced us to Sherlock Holmes and Ireland and the Gold Bug, all sorts of things. And I turned around and read to my in the same way. Puzzle. I think it's a puzzle I like. Out.
Okay. Let's see. Naomi asked, did anything in particular inspire the creation of either Bass or Rutledge, such as a person you knew or a particular event?
The names came from two of my favorite characters of a book I had read and an author I had met. And Charles was perfectly happy with that. we sometimes debate the names of characters, but we wanted somebody in Ian's case who in the Great War and carried that burden when he came back. But he'd been a policeman before the war, and so he tries to pick up the threads of what he had done. He very much explains himself as we go along. When we wrote A Fine Summer's Day, which takes us back before Rutledge goes to war, we thought, well, this will be very easy to write. We know all about Rutledge. We've written 10 books about him. Well, he surprised us. And we kept learning more and more about him as we wrote that book. This is the same way. We wanted to write something about what women had gone through, how women had dealt with the Great War. They bore the burden of grief, and that was very difficult. And we wanted to talk about how they had contributed to the war effort. And she seemed to be the best way, the nurse concept, so the best way to do this. She could talk about the war as well as the home front. Gave her an Indian background because we didn't want her to be a staid Victorian or raised by staid Victorians. Just set her loose. We did know at that time that she had a great grandmother who was at the Battle of Waterloo, or in Belgium at the time of the Battle of Waterloo. And then the rest she just told us. We had no idea it was going to come along the way he did. He, like many characters, got into the storyline and developed. And when a character does that, you don't say, no, go away. You listen. And so, have any of you read A Hanging at Dawn? It's a novella that we wrote around November, was published around November, as both an ebook and as a small novella. It's about Simon's background. Beth doesn't know half of what I know about Simon, but she's going to be figuring it out in the next couple of books.
By the way, someone is interested in Beth and Simon becoming a couple, just so you know.
Leave that up to them.
But there was a question about another character, where the character Hamish came from.
Because Rutledge had been in the trench for 4 years, he couldn't come home unscathed. I mean, nobody, as far as I could, with my research, and that's true of Charles, nobody came home with no wounds. But we had to have experienced the war, and we had to talk about how he experienced the war. If he had lost a leg or an eye or an arm, he couldn't have returned to the yard. But other than the terrible wounds that soldiers suffered, there was PTSD, shell shock. And we wanted to talk about that because for 100 years, that had been a sensitive subject. Nobody wanted to discuss it. And we thought, if Rutledge experiences and has to deal with it, perhaps this will put some light on the subject. And we've had soldiers, former soldiers, come up and tell us we got it right. And that's what we wanted to do. We didn't want to make it a hot gimmick. We wanted to show it for what it was. And Hamish was the best way to do that. I mean, everybody can see and hear what he says to Rutledge, and so they know through that how the war affected them. These are good questions.
Any more questions or romantic suggestions? Who should be with who?
One question we frequently get is, will Rutledge ever be on Masterpiece Theater? Over the years, we've had quite a few requests to buy the series. We turned it down because we want to keep control of Rutledge. We don't want a producer deciding a sudden change in his character, the way they did with some of Elizabeth George's books and so on. We're very protective of that. I think it would break my heart if there was an episode on a Sunday afternoon or a Wednesday evening where Rutledge goes on a binger and speaks with someone. I mean, this is a man who's had to exercise control for a long time and to keep the secrets, to keep Hamish from being known by other people. Even though his shell shock has come out, most people do not know about Hamish. And so that would not be Rutledge. I mean, nothing against the characters and bingers and whatever, but binges. But this is a way that, in our estimation, Rutledge wouldn't behave. This is just one of many examples. Just one I happen to think of.
I'm glad you brought up that question because someone had asked that question and it got lost in the shuffle here. So you did answer the question whether you've been approached about a TV or a movie series.
I'll let you know as soon as we find one that we really believe in, and people we really think will do Rutledge justice. We'll let you know. You'll hear it from the rooftops.
And what about Bess? Has anyone inquired about that series?
If you've noticed lately on TV, strong women's sleuths are coming back. We've watched Masterpiece Theater or Mystery or any of the other stations. We've even taken Robert McCall from the old Equalizer series on TV and turned it into a female character, which blows my mind. I can't wait to see what they've done with that. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear something about Beth really soon.
Now, I have had a question back to your writing process. Since you say that you don't outline, how do you know where the story is going or how it will end?
Well, sorry about that. My husband was a proofreader, and because he was a chemical engineer, he could find any mistake going. So he was a perfect proofreader. But he would start reading a manuscript. And remember, when he got the manuscript, there was nothing beyond what he was reading. It was still in the computer. And he would say about halfway through, this one is not going to work out the way you think it is. I'm really worried. About 3/4 of the way through, he would say, I hope you know where you're going because I don't. And yet, about 30 or so pages buried from the end of a book, we suddenly began to see where the clues, the evidence, and what Rutledge has learned from the characters, where these things take us. In a test of wills, Rutledge suddenly remembered something that he hadn't done, and that brought us to the end. I think it's a piece of frosting yourself, but so far it's happened. I don't believe in writer's block. I think writer's block is really where you have gone off track, and if you can go back and find where you got off track, then you can go forward, and that can sometimes be cutting 100 pages. Charles and I both have had to face that, and it's the way the story keeps you in line, I think.
Constance asked if Ian and Bess might ever be in the same story together.
That's what my editor keeps asking. And I didn't design Bess as a Fisher wife for Rutledge. They know a person in common, Melinda Crawford, who is a cousin of Bess's and her family. And the closest they've ever come to being in the same book, although they're mentioned, I think in A Fine Summer's Day, Melinda says, I invited Bess for the weekend, but they had to go to Paris or something. But in It's Racing the Devil, there's information that Rutledge needs. And he asks Melinda, who contacts Beth, and asks her to find out something about a hotel in Paris, and she does. But you have to remember that in many ways, Bess is 2 years behind Rutledge. And we don't really know what Bess is going to be doing in 2 years' time. I mean, she just took off for Ireland. So it's hard to put them in the same room at the same time.
If you did find someone who you trusted with the Rutledge series, have you thought about who you would like to play that character?
Oh my gosh. Over the years, we've had every name from Colin Firth, who is too old now, Todd, to, what's his name in Sanditon, the hero in that series. I don't know. I think the only way I could judge would be to see the character in action. I think David feels, friend of ours, feels the same way. I think Charles feels the same way. There was a scene in Broadhurst, the original one, where David Tennant opened up to the editor of the newspaper. It was a quid pro quo. If I tell you this, you'll tell me that. And when he talked about what was going on in his mind, I think both of us looked at that and thought, now that's how Rutledge would have to be acted. So we'll see, let's hope. Fingers crossed.
Any more questions coming in?
Any questions about the book that I can't answer? This is one story where, because it explodes as it does into an entirely different inquiry, if you say too much, you give away too much. So it's really exciting, and it was fun living vicariously with Rutledge, doing all the things that he did, so he knew how it was done. I mean, walking on slate in a quarry where one must fall, I don't know, 400 feet into more slate, that's a scary business. Or taking a ride on a narrow boat on an aqueduct 120 feet above the ground, where you've got nothing between you and the plunge to the river below. You have the boat in 6 feet of space. You have 6 feet of tarmac on the other side of you, where the horses used to pull the boats. They have motors now. And that's it. 5 feet between you and a horrible death. And you really know what the characters are going to feel when you do something like that.
We do have a question about the next Best book. When will that be out?
An Irish Hostage will be out in July. Charles and I are very pleased with this one. We had a character in Britannic who, an Irish nurse who had been severely injured, just saved her life. And at the end of the war, when her fiance had come back from a service in British Army, He has asked Bess to stand up with her as her maid of honor. And Bess has to go to Ireland in the middle of. So the problem is, how does she get there? And how safe is she once she gets there? Who can she trust? And things begin to get difficult for her. So it was interesting to use Ireland instead of England and seeing all the places we knew. And we even had our agent take pictures for us to refresh our memory about some of the places. I think it's an exciting book, and if you like Bess and Simon, you'll like this one.
Judy wonders. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
About your writing process again. Do you dictate or type yourself?
I've done everything from writing stuff down on a napkin on an airplane to writing with my iPad and a pencil and a scrap of paper, the back of an envelope. And most of the work is done for both of us on the computer. Charles, I think, is much more a computer person. He really knows a lot about them, so he's comfortable there. I put down what I come up with anytime I can. Both of us have had occasions when we wide awake in the middle of the night and thought to ourselves, "Oh my gosh, this is going to work." We scribble something down. The next morning, when we remember that, we go to look at the scribble. We can't decipher it. I have no idea what that brilliant idea was.
Any other questions coming in?
How do you get your ideas for a book?
Oh, how do we get the ideas? It's very odd. We start out with something that we have seen or come across. In this book, the Fatal Lie, we learned something about the British Army that it just happened to stumble across it, and we thought, "Oh, that is a perfect idea for." The Black Ascot was 2 books back. We had seen a photograph of the Black Ascot races, the start of the social season in England. Was supposed to be cancelled when Edward VII died. The court was in mourning. Everybody in the country was in mourning. So what would you do? Cancel it? And then somebody said, no, the king loved the Black Ascot. And so let's run the race as a memorial to him, but everybody will wear black. Instead of those gorgeous costumes you could see in the race scene in My Fair Lady, everybody wore darkest black shirts black, lace from the ladies' collars black, ostrich feathers in their hats. I've seen the picture, and it's an amazing sight of this group of people in total black. And we thought, ooh, well, there's another good idea for a mystery. What happened? Well, unfortunately, the Black Ascot started was in 1910, and Rutledge doesn't start at the yard until a little later. And by the time we're writing about him, it's been 10 years. So how do we bring that into the present? And we thought, oh, cold case. He's asked to solve a cold case that has been on the books for 10 years. Nobody knows where the murderer is. The escape was vanished. So that's sort of how the books begin. As I mentioned, the one in Cornwall was the footnote in the little brochure about the house we were visiting. We could see how that information could be turned on its head. There were 4 young women who had heroines, when a ship ran aground, they got in a rowboat. They got the people on the ship before it sank, and we thought, what if they tried to do something like that? Somebody on shore thought they were trying to kill the people instead of save them. So that's how we explore them.
Here's a different question. Who will be replacing Simon Preble as the voice of Ian Rutledge in the audio version?
Oh, we've already found a wonderful, wonderful man. His name is also Simon. All of a sudden, my memory has lost his last name. But we were sent, we just love Simon, and a lot of people did. But we were sent 5 audio readings from books that 5 other people had done. And we listened to this one and we thought, I think this is the closest we will come to finding the right voice for Rutledge. We chose the voice for Bess. We chose the voice for the walnut tree. I think it's been very nice that really good readers do several books. I mean, they don't do just one book. And so you get to listen to how they have translated somebody else's work and apply it to yours. It was an interesting experience.
So Christy wants you to know she appreciates the lack of animal harm or death. That you have animal characters, but they always wind up okay in the end.
It really bothers me if I read a book where an animal is harmed. And Charles is the same way. We both have rescues, animals who have had very sad early lives, and we have been able to turn that around and give them a home that is loving and kind. They give back. I mean, these cats and my daughter's case, cats and dogs, they give back the love that you give them. So I would find it hard. New writers are told don't ever kill children or animals, and some of them break that rule. But I find it very difficult to read a book where that goes on. Other people have said it's amazing that they don't use as much foul language as we do today. But in 2021, men were much more careful. Even when I was growing up, they were much more careful about what they had to say in front of women. So, King Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia, wrote a book about his experiences as an airplane mechanic in Afghanistan, and the foul language in the barracks we captured. But that's not really what I'm trying to do in a story, what Charles is seeing in a story. Both of us feel very strongly about this, that if this is something that was done, we have to respect it. If it's not done, don't throw it in just to update it.
So Betsy is suggesting, is it Simon Vance? Is that the name of the reader?
Yes, exactly right. Thank you, Betsy. Simon Vance. And he's very good. I think he will start with The Fatal Lie. But it'd be interesting to hear how you all feel about him. You know, we have a Facebook page. We have Instagrams. We have Twitter. We have a book club. And we have a newsletter. So and we have a wonderful new website. We had designers help us with it, and we're very, very proud of it. We thought it needed an update and worked very well. So there are many ways that you can contact us. tell us what you think.
Well, we seem to be slowing down.
I can't think of anything that we haven't talked about, but if there's anything anybody else can bring up, I'm happy to consider it. It's just nice, as I said earlier, it's just nice to see so many familiar faces and so many familiar names. It's just, I was there, Elena, Fran and Don. I mean, it's great to say hello.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Pleasure.
Many people are writing in to thank you. One, Elena asks if your cats are inspiring you during the pandemic. Your cats?
I had a cat named Fluff, and when I was breakfast every morning, she would go to the rec room door. I had on my computer stuff. And she would go to the door and sit there at 9 o'clock sharp, no matter what else was going on, saying, okay, time to write, get with it. Charles has had several cats who obviously have read books because they sleep with them. And we have several pictures of them sleeping with them. So I think the cats do inspire us. If nothing else, they are loving companions. In the middle of the night when you can't sleep, they're there when you're trying to figure out what the story is going to do next, or which character you're going to talk about in the next scene. They're sitting there, they're on my feet sometimes, which in this weather is wonderful. Feet warm.
Someone asked your Facebook address. I think it's under Charles Todd Author.
But look up Charles Todd, or Charles Todd Author, and you'll find it.
Okay, well, I think it looks like we're wrapping up here. We're so grateful that you were able to come today. People are just scrolling by. Thank you, thank you, thank you. They enjoyed it so much. It was a great, brightened up our Sunday afternoon. So I think I'm going to leave the meeting and kick everybody off.
Well, before you do, let me thank them for coming. I really appreciate hearing from you, hearing the reviews that you have about the characters in the books. We'll be looking at this afterwards when it's online, and we'll be hearing what you have to say too. So you reached both of us. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Okay, you too. Goodbye for today.